Imagine regaining your eyesight after 20 years of blindness, only to uncover a truth so devastating you'd wish you were still blind. That's exactly what happened to Elena Foster. She thought that regaining her sight would give her life back, but instead, it revealed a betrayal so deep it almost shattered her. Stay tuned, because Elena's world is about to be turned upside down in a way no one could have ever anticipated. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. At 32, Elena was a vibrant, ambitious woman with a future full of promise, but everything changed overnight. Without warning, she lost her sight. No accident, no injury, just darkness. Doctors diagnosed her with Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, a rare condition that left her eyes intact but severed her ability to see. She didn't even get to say goodbye to the world she once knew. But Elena wasn't alone. Her husband, David Foster, stayed by her side. A charming, soft-spoken white man, David became her everything, her eyes, her protector, her world. He took over the bills, managed her appointments, even helped her memorize every corner of their home. Everyone said she was lucky to have him, and for years, she believed them. But as time passed, the shadows around Elena began to shift. She noticed small things, barely there details that whispered something wasn't right. A faint scent of jasmine perfume on a shirt she never wore. A wine glass she didn't remember using. Furniture just slightly off from where she left it. The guest room door, which used to stay open, now always closed. A shower running late at night when she hadn't stepped inside. When she asked, David always had an answer, harmless, casual, practiced. You must have bumped the table, so that's from a guest last week. But don't worry about it. And worst of all, he made her feel like she was imagining things. So she stopped asking. And the silence settled in. Not just the silence of sight, but the kind that lives between two people when one stops believing they deserve answers. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar voice. Calm, professional. Mrs. Foster, this is Dr. Lee Harmon from the Brightview Institute. We've reopened trials for a gene therapy, one we believe could restore your sight. Elena didn't respond right away. Her hand trembled slightly against the receiver. For a moment, she thought it was a mistake, that someone had called the wrong woman. But then Dr. Harmon continued, Sonkye's history was part of an earlier submission. Would you consider coming in for evaluation? No one had said those words in over a decade. Not since the first failed treatments. Not since David gently told her to stop getting her hopes up. You need to focus on acceptance, not chasing miracles. But this wasn't coming through David. This was hers, direct, unfiltered. I'll come, she said quietly. She didn't tell him. The next morning, she stood by the door with her white cane and told David she had a neurology follow-up. You want me to drive you? He asked, keys already in hand. She smiled. Oh no, I already booked a rideshare, like she always had. At the clinic, the procedure was simple. A series of injections over weeks, no surgery, no downtime, no promises. Elena kept showing up. She said nothing, even when the light returned. First a glow, then faint outlines, then unmistakably color. One day, in the privacy of her bathroom, she saw her own reflection. For 20 years, she hadn't known what she looked like. Now she stared at the woman in the mirror, older, yes, but still here, still her. She wept. But not just from joy, because alongside the wonder came something colder, clarity. She didn't tell David. She kept pretending, letting him lead her around the kitchen, asking him where the butter was, fumbling for the couch when he watched. Because Elena had a plan. Their 30th wedding anniversary was in just a few days, and she imagined a perfect surprise for David. A quiet dinner, candles, music. She'd take his hand, look into his eyes. I can see you, David. I wanted to save this moment for us. That was the dream. But dreams don't survive the light. The dream began to crack the very next morning. David had gone to work. Elena sat quietly at the kitchen table, hands folded in her lap, seeing everything. She waited until the door closed behind him, then moved through the house with purpose. She opened the dishwasher first. 2 wine glasses sat on the rack, one of them clearly stained with lipstick. She hadn't worn lipstick in years. In the laundry basket, buried beneath David's button-down shirts, she found a silk scarf. Light, floral, delicate, not hers. In the guest bathroom, she noticed 2 toothbrushes now lived in the holder, 2 distinct brands. On the shower shelf, nestled beside David's familiar bottle, sat another shampoo. Sweet, expensive, feminine. And then it came again, the scent. Jasmine. That same fragrance she'd noticed years ago, brushed off as memory or madness. Now, it was real. She found the perfume bottle hidden behind the bath towels, deliberately tucked out of sight. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It had never been that far out of reach. She walked down the hallway to the guest room door. It was locked. That door had always stayed open. She turned to look up at the hallway camera, the tiny device David insisted on installing for her safety. It was unplugged. She hadn't touched it. Her pulse pounded, but she wasn't panicking. She wasn't scared. Not anymore. Because what had once been invisible was now undeniable. The things she'd only suspected in the dark were standing in front of her, in color, in shape, in scent. And still, she didn't confront him. The next day, she waited for David to leave again, then entered his office somewhere he'd always gently, but firmly, kept off limits. A drawer she'd never been allowed to open clicked loose under her fingers. Inside was a single manila envelope. She opened it. A photograph fell into her hand. David, standing shirtless on a beach, smiling in the sun. Wrapped around him was a younger woman, her head resting on his shoulder. The two of them tangled in the kind of closeness only shared by people with no guilt in their hearts. On the back, in David's handwriting, were the words, Cancun, June 17th, best trip yet. Elena's stomach tightened, June 17th, their wedding anniversary. She remembered it vividly. That night she'd sat on the couch in a soft blue dress, freshly pressed. She'd lit a candle, made lasagna, waited, blind but full of hope, for a man who never came home. He had called earlier that day. Work trip, he said. Once came up last minute. I'll make it up to you. She believed him. But while she sat in silence, waiting for a voice that never came back through the door, he was in Cancun, holding another woman. He hadn't just lied. He hadn't just cheated. He had left her, emotionally abandoned her, on the day they promised each other forever. Elena didn't cry. She didn't scream. She placed the photograph back in the envelope not to hide it, but to build her case. Because now, she was no longer trying to prove she could see. She was proving she had seen enough. That night, while David slept beside her, Elena lay awake with her eyes wide open. For the first time in 20 years, both literally and emotionally. The photo had shattered something, but it also sparked a quiet determination. She had seen his betrayal. Now, she needed to understand the extent of it. In the early hours of morning, while the house was still and David snored gently in the dark, Elena crept out of bed and sat at his desk again. This time, she opened his laptop. Her fingers moved slowly at first. Years of being told technology was too frustrating for her now. Made her cautious. But she'd remembered every password he'd ever used. She only pretended not to. She opened the banking app. What she saw almost made her gasp. There were loans, several of them, taken out in her name. 4 applications, all approved, all signed. But not by her. The signatures were forged. The accounts were real. And the money? Transferred. She dug deeper. A checking account she'd never seen before sat quietly in a different bank, registered solely under David's name. Attached to it were large cash withdrawals and payments she couldn't trace. Thousands of dollars moved in and out over the past 7 years. Then came the credit cards. Maxed out. Opened, using her social security number. Bills she never knew existed, paid just enough to avoid suspicion, but never enough to clear the debt. He hadn't just cheated. He had financially gutted her. And then, the final wound. In their old email archive, buried under years of paperless bills and subscription updates, she found something that froze her blood. An email, 6 years old, from a different medical research group. A clinical trial offering an experimental treatment. A chance just like this one to restore partial sight for patients with her condition. She stared at it. The invitation was clear, and we'd love to enroll Elena Foster in this round of therapy. But she had never seen it, because the response had come from their joint email address, sent minutes later. It read, "Thank you, but Elena Foster is no longer interested in pursuing sight restoration. Please remove her from the trial list." It was signed with her name, but she hadn't written it. David had. He had seen the opportunity, and deleted it from her life. He had chosen to keep her blind, chosen to protect his world of control, his secrets, his mistress, and in doing so, he had taken the one thing she still had left, choice. Elena closed the laptop slowly and sat back in the chair. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it wasn't just emotional, it was calculated, systematic, years of deception, all wrapped in tenderness. And now, for the first time, she could see the man she'd been sleeping beside for 30 years, and she no longer recognized him. Elena didn't speak a word the next day. She moved through the house just as she always had, slow, cautious, asking David to help her to the sofa, pretending to fumble for the sugar canister in the kitchen. He kissed her cheek that morning and told her, only a few more hours until our special night. She smiled faintly. I'm looking forward to it. She already knew it would be the last one. By sunset, she had set the table, linen napkins, their best china, candles flickering softly. Everything looked exactly how she imagined. Romantic, intimate. Except now, she understood that the man she loved had never deserved this moment. David walked in holding roses and a bottle of wine. "Happy anniversary," he said, grinning like he had nothing to hide. Elena sat at the table, spine straight, eyes fixed. In front of her sat the envelope, the photograph, the forged bank statements, the fake medical trial response. She didn't say a word as he leaned down to kiss her, but when he met her gaze, he stopped. Her eyes met his, steady, open, knowing. David froze. "Elena," he whispered. "What? What is this?" She exhaled, slow and calm. "Who always assumed I'd never see again." She paused. "But I do now, David. And I see everything." His smile collapsed. He looked down at the table, at the evidence he never thought she'd find, and began to stumble over his words. "Elena, please, let me explain. You didn't just cheat," she said, her voice cutting clean through the room. "And you stole my choices. You signed my name. You buried every opportunity that might have given me a future. You made sure I stayed in the dark, so you could live in peace." He dropped into the chair across from her, panic now fully settling in. "So name is Alyssa," he muttered. "It didn't mean anything. I didn't know how to tell you." "You didn't have to tell me," she said flatly, "because you never thought I'd see the truth." The candlelight flickered between them, illuminating the chasm that had grown in silence for decades. He had built a life on her blindness. And now, she saw him, all of him, without blinking. David sat there, visibly unraveling. The roses, still wrapped in cellophane, rested on the table untouched. The wine bottle tilted slightly in his trembling hand, but he couldn't bring himself to pour. He just stared across the table at Elena, like he was looking at a ghost. Or maybe a judge. "Elena, I didn't mean for it to go this far," he murmured. "Won't you have to believe me? I was scared. I didn't know how to handle everything after your diagnosis. I thought I was protecting you." She didn't flinch. "You weren't protecting me, David. You were protecting yourself from guilt, from discomfort, from inconvenience. You made me your dependent, not your partner." He reached out, as if touching her could somehow erase the years of betrayal. "Please, we can fix this. I'll make it right. I'll cancel the accounts. I'll pay everything back. I'll stop seeing her. Just don't leave me." Elena quietly reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. Inside, divorce papers, power of attorney revocation, and a letter addressed to a fraud investigator. David's face fell. "You're serious?" "I've already spoken with a lawyer," she said, "and I've contacted the credit bureaus. The financial damage you caused is being reviewed. And as for Alyssa," her eyes flicked toward the photo, "you can keep her. You'll need someone to help you pack." He stared at her, stunned, as if the woman he once knew had disappeared overnight. But she hadn't disappeared. She had emerged. Elena stood slowly, pushed in her chair, and gathered her things without trembling. "You can keep the house," she said, voice calm and final. "Keep the furniture. Keep your secrets, too. I'm keeping me." David didn't move, didn't chase, didn't speak. And for the first time in 2 decades, Elena walked toward the door. Without anyone guiding her. She didn't reach for the wall. She didn't ask for help. She opened the door herself and stepped out into the world not as the blind woman who needed saving, but as the woman who had saved herself. The door shut behind her with a quiet finality. No tears, no backward glance. Just the sound of shoes tapping against the pavement, her shoes, carrying her forward. For the first time in 20 years, Elena Foster didn't have to imagine what the world looked like. She could see it, and it was hers now. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Unraveling the financial damage David left behind required hours of paperwork, calls, and court filings. She faced questions, disbelief, even pity from people who once called her lucky to have him. But Elena didn't shrink under the weight of it. She moved through it, deliberate, visible, unafraid. David was investigated for financial exploitation. His accounts were frozen. The loans he forged in her name were voided. And when the truth surfaced, even Alyssa disappeared, leaving behind nothing but her jasmine perfume and a name Elena no longer cared to remember. But Elena didn't stop there. She launched a nonprofit called the Clarity Project, a safe space for women with disabilities who had suffered in silence, especially those manipulated financially or emotionally by the people closest to them. She stood on stages and told her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. "I lost my sight," she once told a crowd, "but I didn't lose my value. I didn't lose my voice. And now that I can see, I see how many of us are told to settle for being grateful to the wrong people. I say, no more." People listened. Women wrote to her from all over the country, some crying, some cheering, all of them seen. She started living again, not just existing inside the quiet walls of a house built on lies, but walking freely in a world she could finally claim, not as David Foster's wife, but as Elena Foster. Whole, clear, and unstoppable. Elena Foster thought the hardest part of losing her sight was learning to live in darkness. But she was wrong. The hardest part was realizing the person guiding her through that darkness had been leading her into a lie. He made choices she couldn't challenge, took freedoms she couldn't see, and when light finally returned to her world, so did the truth, raw, brutal, and undeniable. But Elena didn't fall apart. She took back her voice, her power, her life. Because sometimes it's not the blindness that breaks you, it's the betrayal you were never meant to witness. So here's the question. If someone you loved kept you in the dark, not just figuratively, but literally, could you ever forgive them? Or would you walk away like Elena with your head high and your eyes wide open? Let us know your answer in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.